Welcome to the new season of High Flyers in STEM podcast series, Greatness Has No Gender, where we celebrate the journeys of incredible leaders in STEM. Today, we are delighted to welcome two inspiring leaders, Laura Collins, R&D Director, and Mollie Mulligan, Assistant Global Marketing Manager with the Kerry Group. Laura carries the resilience she developed during her PhD into the commercial world, with science remaining a constant thread from the lab bench to the boardroom. Mollie's science roots moved from nutrition to global product and brand market reach with her What's Next thinking. Thank you to our sponsor Spinero, a multi-award winning company specialising in financial success for contractors, freelancers and solopreneurs. It's a privilege to sit down with Laura Collins and Mollie Mulligan today. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the podcast. Mollie and Laura, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really delighted to have you both from the Kerry Group and have a little chat about women in STEM, your careers to date, and I suppose just hearing a little bit about your stories and learning a little bit about your experiences and your thoughts and around leadership and different things. So I'd love to start with you, Laura, maybe telling me a little bit about what has got you to where you are in your career, where, you know, your job to date and your career path as such that...
Perfect. Well, firstly, thank you for having us. Quite a pleasure and an honour. So I would say I had quite a squiggly career. So I started into common entry into science, never really knew the discipline I wanted to end up in, went into analytical science because I thought it would lead to more jobs. And then on my final year, was doing a final year project and I was really interested in the science and really enjoyed it. And the PI at the time said, had I ever considered a PhD? And I said, no, I hadn't. And, you know, maybe I should, and applied. And then hop, skip, jump a few, 13 years later, I had stayed in academia the whole way through up to postdoc. And that was a fantastic time, so different, not what I had expected to do. But at the end of the postdoc, it was a collaboration with the dairy partners in Ireland. So it was Food for Health Ireland, and one of those was Kerry Group. So I went into Kerry Group on a secondment to see whether I enjoyed industry, and I'm still there 9.5 years later. So you could say I've got a bit of staying power when it comes to roles. But within Kerry Group then I've had quite a squiggly career as well. So I went into nutrition science, supporting the business with nutrition strategy across the end use markets. And then just around that time when I joined, we had an acquisition of an immune health ingredient, and that complemented my PhD in immunology quite nicely. So I became a subject matter expert in it, but that translated actually very quickly into business development. So I then ended up leading the business across Europe for our functional ingredients in business development. And then after that, it was a really interesting one. Again, completely new skill set in terms of commercial, but I was heavily leaning on my science because we were talking about the science of the product and the ingredient. Went into innovation and we looked at licensing in new ingredients into the business within our space. And then I'm now back into R&D. So I'm now an R&D Director for cognitive health and our cognitive health ingredients. So kind of a very squiggly career, but you know, we get that opportunity quite a lot across the business in Kerry that you can pivot and use different kind of skill sets that you have and explore what you enjoy as well.
Well, absolutely. You might say squiggly, but you've got 4 different roles there within that 9 years, which is brilliant. Yeah, no, huge exposure.
It's really nice because I think the commercial acumen that you can grow in a business role then translates really nicely back into your science role because you realise what is commercially relevant and what you need to do and what would be great to help with the commercial side of the business while then growing the science. So you can kind of use of them both on both sides, which is fantastic too.
Yeah. So you're still drawing from what you were drawn to, I guess, in the original state, which was the science, and still being able to pull out of it from all of those roles.
100%. And that was core the whole way through. I always leaned back to my science, but the function or the discipline I was in may have changed, but I was always leaning back on my science, which was always kind of a lovely fallback that you always had that as your core or your centre.
Not necessarily a safety net, but still there.
Yeah, just as in you were leaning on your training.
Yes.
And you could use it on those senses. So.
Yeah, so no imposter syndrome there because you always had it.
I don't know about that. I think a lot of people would feel that there is imposter syndrome, and especially in new roles where you don't have the commercial training or whatever. But I think a lot of the time when you've done a PhD, it does give you a lot of resilience as well. And that builds your resilience to be able to say, okay, well, look, I've achieved this. I can achieve it at a different setting and so on as well.
Okay, brilliant. And Mollie, yours has been a little bit different to Laura's career path. Tell me a little bit about yours.
Yeah, so look, I would have started by studying nutrition in UCD, so definitely very science focused at the start, and like as part of that I did different placements, one of which was actually over in DC where Laura would have studied, in the School of Human Health and Performance in their research labs there. So I was very much set on potentially going down a career in academia, and I suppose towards the end of my degree COVID hit, so it was obviously a very different time for everyone, but it kind of made me take a step back and I suppose reconsider what I wanted to do. So with that I decided, okay, I needed to go out and work, because I guess, you know, when you're in school and then you're straight into college and it's like on to the next thing constantly. So I said, you know, I need to actually get some real life experience. So I got a role as a group nutritionist for a big corporate caterer at the time. So the likes of companies that are in running the restaurants for, let's say, Kerry or any kind of companies like that. And my role there, a big part of it was, you know, getting people back to the office and trying to encourage that through our food offering and the wellness piece. So with my colleagues in that company, it was designing wellness programs, providing nutrition one-to-one sessions, and helping design like the food menus and stuff. And while that was obviously great, I kind of realised when I was into that a bit that I wanted to do something a little bit bigger, a little bit more. So then I saw a master's programme come up with Board BIA and DCU, and I applied for that and got it. And that was in Insights and Innovation Management for the food industry specifically. So I went back and I started studying there. So that was all around like marketing, strategy, innovation. And that's then how I ended up in Kerry Group in a marketing role, which was obviously very different to what my undergrad was. But the section that we work within is our proactive health section. So it's all about health ingredients that would typically go into supplements. So there was really nice synergies there. And then for the last 2 and a bit years, I've stayed in that part of the business. So working through the marketing team and now taking on a product management role as well. So I think for me, the consistency was always food, definitely to do with, but also the health piece was always there. So even though now I'm in more of like a marketing and product management role, I still rely so heavily on my science background. And, you know, even when I look at our marketing team in the section I'm in, most of them come from a science background, you know, so it just shows it really kind of stays with you and you need it in that sort of role.
But it must bring a huge understanding and was like nearly a confidence to what you speak about.
Exactly, yeah, because like what I always think is how can you communicate something if you don't understand it yourself? So I think that's really a key piece of everything we do on the marketing side anyways. You know, you really need to understand the science, and like working with colleagues like Laura and all her RD&A team, that obviously informs me, and I'm not the expert, her and her teams would be, but it's then about taking that information and translating it so that the consumer off the street who has no science background can actually understand it and digest the information that's often extremely technical. So it's kind of combining the two skills together. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And Laura, you've gone from immunology PhD to leading R&D. How did you make that transition from kind of lab to kind of nearly board in that and senior leadership?
I suppose it's probably what I would harp back to is I've never actively made a decision about my career, and that may sound like I wasn't ambitious, but I never said I wanted to achieve a certain role. I always led where I was interested or I had seen, you know, something I wanted to do. So when I was working in the postdoc, I found the food industry really interesting. I thought it was really cool that you could, you know, address health benefits through food and how you could deliver that to consumers. So that translation piece of actually getting it onto the shelf, and that's what attracted me to Kerry, that I could actually translate that into something. And then as I grew through Kerry, I would say, just as opportunities arose, it gave me that kind of direction to keep moving roles and to try different things as well. And I suppose that ultimately led me to where I'm at now as well. So it hasn't been a planned journey, but it's been an enjoyable journey because I've always gone with where I wanted to see what the next step was or something that drew me that was interesting.
And you say, you know, it's always kind of been the food and the science that has led you to that. And how do you, from being very much academic based to, I suppose, people management and leadership now, do you feel that your time in academic helped that, or has it been a nearly a faster growth curve in the last 9 years?
Yeah, like I think a lot of people tend to say once you've done a PhD, you have that resilience and you have that, you know, sticking to a project and seeing it, you know, drawing it out and getting it to the end and so on. I think it's definitely given me that skill set, but I also think it's given me a skill set in terms of growth and people management, because you can see someone growing in their career and driving them and bringing them along that journey as well, which I ultimately adore. Like I really, really love people management because I enjoy seeing people grow, and talent management is so exciting when you see someone who maybe over the course of 2 years is at the end of the 2 years and they're presenting back a project that you've been with them on from the start, and they are then telling you how the journey has gone, and the growth in that individual is also something I really enjoy. So I think at every element of my journey, I've kind of grown maybe a little piece of my own self-development too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is. Leadership now is about developing people, isn't it?
Oh, it like, honestly, it's probably like your achievements will come and go, and will be forgotten, but not how you made someone feel and how, you aided their journey as well. So that's probably the bit that I enjoy the most and most proud of too.
I suppose you think about your journey and everything, both of you went from academic to where you are now. Has there been a person or a standout person that I suppose has been a shining light for you, has led by example or pushing you nearly to make more of yourself and take a leap into the unknown a bit?
I suppose from my side, I've had various different role models throughout my journey, I'd say, in life. Like I was raised by a wonderful single mom who never made me see that gender was, there was no difference. Like I obviously knew there was gender differences, but as in it never made a difference to me, if you're female or not. Anything. Absolutely. And I think it was only as I kind of got older and into new environments that you start to see, okay, well, like gender can make a difference, and how you present yourself or how someone else presents themselves can kind of lead to differences. And I think when I first started to realize that, I became very passionate about it because it had never been an issue. And then when I started to notice that it really irritated me. And I think probably early on in my career, I was probably a little bit annoying about it because I was so passionate about female leadership and women in STEM and so on. And I always hark back to, I had been asked to sit on a board external to Kerry, and I was delighted about the opportunity. And at the very first board meeting, again, during COVID, we were all online, and they had said in the meeting that there was a position on the board coming up. And, we needed to fill it. And I was still a bit new. So I put into the chat and I said, if we do recruit someone onto the board and they're male, the gender balance will be very heavily towards male. And I got really bad feedback, and they were saying it's based on, who the company puts forward or merit, and this is nonsense and so on. And I took it quite badly, and I said, okay, well, I won't put my hand up and say these things again. But it transpired that the chair of the board then rang my manager's manager and kind of said, well, Laura's after raising this and we're not so sure, is everything okay there? And I never forget this to the day. Apparently the manager said back, and he said, well, what did she say? And she said she raised gender balance. And he said, well, if Laura's going to bring that up, we're going to support her every time. And I just remember that key moment of kind of saying, God, Kerry really have my back in these instances. And during that journey, I was part of the group that started the D&I, or the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, as it was then called. We were a grassroots group of maybe less than 20 of us that said we really wanted to do something. And I remember that really propelling me to say, okay, we can do this. And what's really nice now is that Mollie now sits on the Women at Kerry, which is the ID&B that it's now called.
Yeah, so I suppose on my side, probably to Laura's point at the start, like I have 3 older sisters and obviously my parents as well, but a very female dominant household, you could say. So I don't think there's one person, kind of to Laura's point there. I think throughout my career, obviously on a personal side, I've had my sisters to guide me, which has been great. But even in a professional capacity, I've been really lucky with the managers I've had and mentors who have actually been predominantly female, which is even better. But as Laura said, in Kerry, we do have a group called Women at Kerry, so part of the DIMB Europe platform. And that's been a brilliant network, I think, is at this stage, it's the way to describe it's even bigger than the 20 people now. It's much larger than that. Larger. And there's women who are in that, like Laura, who would have been there from the start, who are in very senior roles now, and to get their mentorship and, their perspective is brilliant, but also to bring in a new, younger cohort of people. And as well, obviously there's a number of male allies within that, which is good to get their buy-in and their perspective too. But I think all of those different pieces, whether it be the mentors that I've had over the last number of years or groups like that, that's really, I suppose, what propels you forward and what, you know, pushes you to that next level. It's never just, I think, one person. It's multiple people have different influences. So it's kind of learning from what they've done and from their perspectives, and like even people like Laura, like for me to learn from her. Do you know what I mean? It's great, like, to have that, you know. So
thank you, Mollie.
But it is true. You both have had it from such a young age, and you're also drawn to it as well as a person. You know, I think if you feel that back, as you said, from your manager's manager, to say, you know what, if you know that one little bit of that could have gone either way at the time, and that encouragement had just absolutely propelled you forward with what you wanted to do next,
and to have the passion of it, then to speak up about it as much as, you know. Now maybe I'm not as feisty as I would have been 6 years ago about this topic, but it was that to have someone that was going to be an ally, that a male ally at that, like that wasn't, and he has subsequently passed, but it was lovely to kind of say, okay, well, they have my back, you know, we can really make differences here. And I still remember the day we raised the first pride flag on the Kerry Centre, like, you know, we all went there, took pictures, like it wasn't that long ago, but still it's
huge strides since then.
Huge strides, which it's so exciting to see,
and courageous to be able to do that, to write into it. I don't know if I'd be that courageous.
I know, again, I was probably more feisty than I but it was just from pure passion, like, you know. And we have a wonderful group of women within Kerry, but particularly at that time we had a very strong female division, and one of the ladies there had brought in Mary O'Rourke just prior to COVID. It was our first International Women's Day, and oh my God, she was so inspiring. And from that, we were like, God, we need to do more of this. This is fantastic. And I still remember Mary O'Rourke like giving out to the CTO who was moderating it, saying, I'm not finished with this point. And it just to show that level of, you know, female leadership, and everyone's like, oh, you'd never speak like that to Albert. Like, and it, you know, it gives you that lovely feeling of female leadership and empowerment as well, because she was an absolute trailblazer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to have that early on in your career in Kerry, and to see that that's the type of role models they're bringing in was fantastic.
Always, it was so inspirational.
When we talk about the next generation STEM leaders and the challenge that they face, we don't even know what they will be. It's so rapidly changing at the moment. What are the qualities that we need to develop to lead the next generation?
Yeah, I don't know. I like, on my side, I think obviously adaptability is the number one thing there. But I think probably to kind of point to some of the points Laura was making there, I think passion is so important. Like, we don't know what the future holds. You know, I'm hoping to still be part of that generation in the next few decades, but like, we don't know what it holds. But if you're passionate about something and want to learn, then, you know, you'll be better equipped as a leader in that capacity. So I think passion for me is always number one piece. But I don't know, on your side, Laura, please.
I think I've already touched on resilience, because you know, when we think about it in 20 years' time, the rate of change we experience in 1 year now will happen in 3 months in 20 years' time. And we talk about resilience like it's something that we have to grow, but sometimes it is just a matter of self-reflection and saying, well, I've, you know, been resilient in so many instances up to this point that I will get on with it, and leaning into change. Because, you know, we just before this podcast, you know, I think the topic of AI comes up the whole time, and we were talking about how we're going to adapt and how we're going to change, but we will, but it's leaning into the change, because change in most organizations and in life is constant. So leaning into the change and trying to, you know, navigate that, you do build resilience quite quickly as well.
The personal aspect won't go away. Of course it'll change, and the pace of change is always going to be increasing. But I think the personal aspect of, and the qualities that we need, like resilience, like passion, like adaptability, that will always be there. And I think that's why always, you know, humans will hopefully still be a huge part of what we do in decades to come. I
absolutely, like, there's a brilliant guy, James Hewitt, who talks about self-development and change and resilience. And he says, you know, AI will only ever take away a smaller part, and it'll open up humans to far more creativity. And I think that's the best way for me to look at it. That if I say, look, there are certain things here that AI can enable me to do, but then going beyond that and being able to be more creative, especially in STEM roles. Because a lot of the work we can do can be quite spreadsheet heavy, or, you know, calculation heavy. If you can ease you away from that to open up creativity, I think it can only do good things.
It's freeing up space for innovation and, like, for brain space, you know, like what they call white space, to actually think instead of just doing the mundane tasks, you know. So I definitely think we need to embrace it more.
And lean in.
Lean in.
To use our lovely Sheryl Sandberg term.
Brilliant. Okay, from the outside, people might see your position and title, but what is something, Mollie, that people don't see about being in your role?
Yeah, so I think when people hear like marketing roles, they tend to think, they're very glamorous typically. And, maybe it's more on the social media side and what they probably associate with, business to consumer marketing. But obviously the marketing we're doing is business to business. And we obviously work specifically in, health ingredients. But I think a huge part of my role, which is a global role, and it probably links to your role as well, Laura, is the innovation piece. Obviously you've the day-to-day marketing, but we're always planning for the future. So, okay, what are going to be the consumer health needs in 1 year, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? And how can we start planning for that now? So even from a marketing perspective, like where is the market going? What will those needs be? And how can we potentially address that? And that's obviously not just a marketing function working on that. That's collaborating with our R&D colleagues, our innovation teams and so on. But that's probably such like a huge part of the role that takes up so much time that you don't necessarily see. So all the piece around innovation and strategy. And it's also, I think, the most important piece, where the future is going,
Yeah, marketing, you think of marketing, you're just seeing what you're seeing right now.
Exactly. Yeah, you think, it's what comes up on your social media pages or how the brand presents, but it's so much beyond that, as it's the what's next is so important and it's a huge part of it.
Laura, as a STEM leader, what leadership quality do you believe has been maybe most important in your career?
Probably adaptability, given the fact I've pivoted a few times and not being scared of that as well, just seeing what else is out there and what we're doing and where we're going. Because again, in a time with a high rate of change, being adaptable, pivoting, trying new things isn't scary. At the time it's very scary, but it can ultimately lead to something that you're so interested in and you've got a real passion for that you never even knew existed. I think Mollie's story is fantastic because she had, a nutrition background, now in marketing, now driving strategy in terms of what the future of food will be. So again, it's kind of understanding different roles and giving them a go as well.
When you think about the movements you've made in the four different, are they opportunities that you went for yourselves, or are they opportunities that you were approached about, or has there been a mix?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I think in the business development role, I was naturally communicating science to a point that it would be commercially beneficial. Okay. So it was a natural transition. And then I think in the R&D role, an opportunity came up and it was an acquisition that we had, and was that something I was interested in, and I gave it a go. So I think it can very much depend. But I think as well, a lot of time, especially in a post-COVID era, sometimes the networking can be a little bit harder. But definitely prior to COVID, that would have been a big piece of my career, understanding who was in what division and what did they do and how did they get there and their journeys. I love understanding someone's journey because you're never going to pick up a CAO and tick a box and be in that for the rest of your life. But when you talk to someone, you say, hey, actually, they did that. I could look into this or give that a go. So again, kind of not being too directional in your career and deciding that that's only what I ever want to be, and taking opportunities when they arise.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's very obvious from all the different roles, is going, I can pivot here, and even though I'm in this right now, who knows what I'll be in 3 years' time.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact that you could get that opportunity in Kerry Group is brilliant.
Oh no, it is. And they're very supportive of that, in fairness. Trying different roles, trying new things, it is something that is encouraged. It's encouraged, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Has there been a moment when you doubted your own leadership ability then? How did you work through that?
Every day. I genuinely believe that as a good leader, you always doubt yourself and you always question as to whether you're doing the right thing. But Mollie and I discussed this before the podcast. We both feel, I think, that it's just an element of good self-awareness.
Yeah, if you're not doubting yourself, I'd be more concerned about that side. But no, I agree. I think it's every day and everything, and I think everyone experiences this. Probably if you ask someone who's, leading a business, who's at CEO level, they probably doubt themselves as well. I think it's probably a really normal thing. But it's about accepting that, but still moving forward, and actually getting things done and proceeding and not letting that hold you back is the main thing.
And I think when you think about leadership, it's not just, okay, you can have self-doubt, but it's what you pull on from around you to help, as you said, keep moving through that.
Exactly, yeah. Because look, I think anyone in any leadership role will know themselves. You can't be an expert on everything. So it's pulling on the people around you all the time, and whether it's people who are reporting into you or just from different functions and getting their expertise and whether you doubt yourself, it's making sure that everyone's on the same page. And then just, I think moving forward is always the main thing, whatever the decision may be.
And I think leadership sometimes people can be predispositioned to imagine that it's everybody below you. But in a matrixed organisation that we work within Kerry, there's a lot of leading by encouragement and bringing people along with you on your decision process and your planning. And that can nearly be far harder because you're bringing people on your journey, you're bringing people along your thought process. And that also takes a lot of development too, to ensure that you understand how someone hears something, or you know how to communicate it to that person so that you can bring them along that as well.
To get buy-in and like stakeholder management, I think for both of us is
Yeah.
a huge part of our role. So whether that be from more senior people or people on the same level, I think it's every day you're doing it. So it's, as Laura said, knowing how to communicate with people and getting them on board in the journey.
So when we go back to our previous question about qualities in future leaders, it's still communication, isn't it?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, how we get our message across is so important, knowing that there's so many different personalities listening to that same message.
Exactly.
And hoping that
and
it
their own
lands right.
interests as well, because sometimes your thought process may not be of, some, and understanding that and acknowledging it and then trying to figure out how to navigate that too. So it's and culturally as well, you'll also have different cultures of how a message can be portrayed. Like Mollie and I work on a very, very global team. We work with Spanish, French, Canadian, American, Irish colleagues, and how you articulate your message is also very important. I have a fabulous manager, and she all encourages to read the book, The Culture Clash, to ensure that we would all understand how we communicate and how we say things, because we may have different nuances and how we go about things. So we mentioned self-awareness, but it is ensuring that you can read around you and ensuring that you're developing your message correctly.
And is there training around leadership is there mentor programs, stuff like that in the Kerry Group?
Yeah, there's a number of different programs that they run. There's like a women in leadership program they run. I think annually they have new cohorts for that. There is mentorship programs as well. Like I have some unofficial mentors, unofficial mentors in Kerry. So it's both. But like I think the main thing is that I've personally found in my career within Kerry to date is senior leadership is very much willing to mentor people, whether it be in an official or unofficial capacity, and like to help you learn from their experience, which is really invaluable because the people who've come before know far more, and they can really lead you and guide you, which I found to be like a super beneficial thing in my career to date.
I think sometimes the non-official you get more from sometimes.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. A non-structured format where you can just bounce an idea off somebody is generally far more beneficial than,
That's in the moment when you need that someone to bounce off.
Yeah.
Speaking of in the moment of someone to bounce off, can you think of like maybe a leadership mistake you would have made in the past that you learned so much from that you do it very differently next time?
For me, it would come back to that culture piece.
Right. Okay.
I would have not had experience in managing a non-Irish team, and then when we brought in the acquisition, I did. And simply how you communicate a message is different culturally, and that's one of the things that if I had known that sooner, I probably would have adapted my messaging or my style quicker, and ensuring that people understood my message, because I thought I was being exceptionally clear, wherein sometimes you're not.
Okay.
And sometimes it's the nuances and the chat and the conversation that brings people along that journey, and sometimes it's a case of being very direct. It just depends on the culture you're managing. So that will be a piece as well for me.
And that is learning by doing, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And taking from that mistake and saying, okay, this is what I'll adapt next time.
Absolutely.
And it comes back to that awareness and self-awareness that you spoke about earlier. Mollie, was there ever a time in your path that you took an unexpected turn that actually brought you closer to your goals?
Yeah, like I think my whole career has been, as Laura described it, a squiggly career, but mine has been full of unexpected twists and turns to get to where I am, I suppose, today. Obviously starting from the science background, then moving into more of the marketing side, and even now taking on this more product management role. Like the whole journey to date has been full of twists and turns, and I'd love to say that it was planned. It definitely wasn't. But I'm still happy where I'm at, and I'm sure like in another few years, I'm sure other things will happen and I'll think, how did I get here? But I think the main kind of thing that's always been there throughout has been the science to rely back on, and obviously the food element for me has always been the kind of key driving piece and where my passion always was. So even though it's taken many twists and turns and I've ended up in strange places, like that's always been the driving factor and something that I've always been able to kind of fall back on and have there as like a consistent piece. So yeah, and I'm sure looking 10, 20 years, if I was sitting here again, it would be the same thing.
There'll be lots more squiggles.
Yeah, who knows where I'll be. Like I could end up back on the science side, like you never know, but the challenge of change is good, and that's what I like. So
and the journey's been good so far.
Exactly. And it's just about embracing it. And like as a person who plans everything in my life, it's actually good not to be able to plan this and just to see where you go and like take opportunities as they come up, whether it be that you go for them yourself or push for them or whatever it is. You end up where you should be, I think, in the end, which is the main thing.
When we think about one area in your life that you're currently focused on improving, is there something you're passionate about at the moment and taking steps towards becoming more experienced in, I guess?
Yeah, I think on my side, it's probably on, the business acumen side. Like I obviously came from a science background, then it was more on like the innovation and marketing piece. And now as I move into this more product management role, it's making sure that I have that, commercial mindset, which is obviously super important. So I think I've been working on that for the past couple of months, couple of years probably. And I'm really lucky that like I don't have any like official plan with it, but we spoke about those mentors and those unofficial mentors, and within the business, like I definitely have those people who are able to guide me and, able to help me level up in that regard. So I think for me, that's probably the main piece at the moment in my career that I'm working on.
Yeah, I think it's a really important part of putting it all together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like pieces
for
of
you.
a puzzle, like, do you know what I mean? And they all interlink somewhere. It's just kind of finding the bridges and connections and bringing in everything, all the information you already have, and it's all still relevant. It's just kind of connecting it all together. So, yeah. Absolutely.
That's super thought process around bringing it all together. How about you, Laura? Anything particular you're working on at the moment?
Nothing particular, because I had a previous boss in Kerry who would be very big on self-development, and he was someone who really gave me a love for self-development. So he would have always started the year with his commercial goals and his personal goals, and I started that for a while and I used to find it a little bit hard. And then I've now, at the start of the year, I have my vision board and what I want to achieve within the year, and if whether they materialize or they don't, but I will review it at the end of the year and then decide what I want to carry on to the next year. Because I'm quite, like, I've learned over my years, I'm a visual learner. So for me, it's visual, and I go about it that way. And then throughout the year, then try and attain those different milestones that I can see on the board ahead of me.
And they'd be a mix of both personal and commercial goals.
I didn't actually notice it until I was talking to a coach once, and I said I actually didn't realize I had it broken up on the board very clearly into personal, fitness, work and health. So I had them all broken down quite nicely, and every year then I readdress the same one and then adapt to see whether it's something I'm happy with, or if it's moved forward. Hopefully it has.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. And I'd be quite visual as well. So it's
a lot easier, I find, as well, because especially it depends on your learning style or who you are. But I always used to try and write down either, what we would call resolutions or goals. But for me, that just doesn't work. What works for me is the thought process of that's what I'd like in my mind's eye, and then reach towards it.
Yeah. And I tend to work backwards then from that. What
little things do I need to do? And I'll know to get there what I need to do, and so on.
Yeah.
So
it pushes yourself, having a little career path in your head.
Completely.
Yeah. When we think about kind of vulnerability and challenges and self-doubt, and I know we've touched on this already, but can you share a time when you had to grow into a role, Mollie, or maybe lead before you felt that you were fully ready for that position?
Yeah, like I think there's been many times that's happened, but I suppose the most recent time for me was probably just over a year ago now. One of our colleagues and my manager at the time was going on maternity leave, and as part of that I was asked to step up and I suppose fill her role, which was leading the marketing for a health platform, so our immune health platform. And at the time I definitely in my head did not feel ready to do so, leading out the strategy there, being responsible for a brand that is worth quite a significant amount and leading that out. But I suppose if I hadn't had that opportunity to step up and work within that space, then I wouldn't be in my role now. Like now I'm obviously leading out a different health platform in the same business, but I wouldn't have had that without the business, I suppose, giving me that stretch opportunity. And in the moment I felt like, God, is this the right thing? But now in hindsight, I'm like, well, of course I was able to do it, but you always have those moments of self-doubt. But I think they lead to growth opportunities, which is always the main point, And
they say that like there has to be a bit of uncomfort to move forward, doesn't there?
No, yeah. Look, I think if you didn't feel uncomfortable in the moment, it'd be stranger. So, but look, it was a great experience to be able to do that. And now, thankfully, she's back, which is great. So I have her as another mentor. But I wouldn't be in this role if it hadn't been for that opportunity either. So
great. So even though you felt you weren't ready at the time, it pushed you through to get to where you are now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Laura, can you share any kind of quiet behind the scenes kind of win that made you proud?
I think this goes back to people development, because I enjoy that so much. It's when you see somebody who has been either, you've been mentoring or people managing, and you see their growth and you see them in a corporate setting growing. I still remember Mollie coming into the business and working with Niamh and seeing someone like that growing through the business. It's brilliant. You can, it's so exciting. And my team now, they would have come in from an acquisition Kerry made a number of years ago, and bringing them into a corporate setting and then presenting back to teams, and immense sense of pride when they're presenting back the work they've done. That has been quite a scientific, complicated experiment, and then presenting it back to a broader team and showing what they've done. And that to me is, you get a real kick from that. And I think again, it's the real pride where you're kind of saying you've brought someone along the journey and hopefully they're doing well.
I think I go back to when we first met and we were just talking about the podcast and Mollie's name came up and you were almost like a proud colleague. You were like, it's Mollie, she has grown so much, and you can see why the development and the mentorship means so much to you because you identify in others.
I also think Mollie brings a beautiful kind of transition as well, and showing, that again, STEM careers can be seen to be very rigid, and you might be wearing a lab coat and against a bench for 20 hours a day, where in fact, your training can lead to a totally different career. And scientific communication, I think, is such a responsibility, and we have to communicate science, and in doing so correctly that people understand it would be a bit of a passion project, particularly within our division, because they're very science heavy branded ingredients that we need to make sure people understand the health benefit of. So again, it's where you can bring your career with STEM too, I think is super interesting.
What part of your work then energizes you most?
For me, it's the translation or innovation onto the market. Okay. So I really, really enjoy seeing us going from an ingredient that supports a health benefit to building the science on it, to translating it into a market-ready product with one of our partners, and then seeing people consume it. Like that to me is really exciting. Like seeing the genesis of the double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial on an ingredient, then saying it can deliver a health benefit like digestive health, to then seeing it on the shelf in store. I get such a kick out of that because you see the whole genesis of the product and you can see the benefit that it can do, that it just excites you. Like I still remember when we had a product launch and it was with FMCG customer, and it was during COVID, and being raging I couldn't get out to the supermarket to see it on the shelf, but getting that absolute buzz of pride when I did go into the shop and see it on the shelf and say that has our probiotic and that's delivering a health benefit. So that to me is exciting, it really is, and being part of that journey too, to know that you were sitting on a call for how many hours a day trying to get it over the line, and then seeing consumers just picking it up and drinking and not realising what went behind it too.
It's great taking from grassroots right through to seeing it on the shelf
yeah.
and looking at that whole circle. It's brilliant to be able to be part of that, as you say. Mollie, what would you tell your younger self? And what would she need to hear now if you were talking back to her?
Yeah, I think it's probably, it's like everything works out, and as cliche as that it can be. I remember when I was like doing my leaving cert and I was stressed, and then when I was in college and then it was COVID and I was like, where am I going to end up? What job am I going to do? Or am I making the right choices? And I think when life firstly, there's no right or wrong choice, but no matter where you are, there's always, a route which is A and a route which is B, and it's about just making a decision and going for it. But ultimately, wherever you end up, it's where you're meant to be. And there's different paths. I think from both my experience and Laura's experience, there's different paths to different roles and to different careers, and there's no linear path and no straightforward path, especially I think in the fields that we're in. So it's just that everything will work out in the end, and wherever you're meant to be, you will end up eventually, whatever kind of the route.
Laura, do you have a phase or a mantra or a lesson that you come back to when you feel tough or life is tough or uncertain?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I always remember we had a history book, and it was Robert Bruce, and it was never give up, never give in, and don't forget you're bound to win. Now, apparently, he didn't actually say that. He said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But I think across my career, PhD can be exceptionally taxing, postdoc as well. Even certain roles you may have in a business can be quite taxing. But just, that persistence, resilience, building a resilience if you're persistent. And, you may have to say yourself quite a lot as well. And, you'll get there. But yeah, that's something from very little I've always said to myself.
I think to add to your point, I have one that I say in my head quite a lot, which is I can't do it yet. And obviously the yet is the most important piece there, because I often think back and I'm like, okay, if I think about, what I can do today that I couldn't do 5 years ago or 1 year ago or even 5 days ago, you're learning so much every day. And at the time it seems like such a big task, or you could be really stressed. But then once it's done, then you know how to do those things going forward. So it's the yet is so important in that. And
that's really nice.
Yeah.
Really like that.
Try again piece.
Yeah.
It is. That's brilliant. As you said, I mightn't be able to do it yet, but by tomorrow or next week, I'll have those skills. When you're in that learning mindset all the time. What advice would you give someone looking to pursue a career in STEM?
I think on my side, it's probably just to stay, well, first go for it, but then just to stay really open-minded within it. I think if my career journey so far shows anything, it's I obviously went in and studied nutrition, and I'm not now in a traditional nutrition role, but I still use that science every day. And I think if I hadn't been open-minded to other roles that have come up, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I think that will probably stay the case going forward into the future. So it's just to stay open-minded within it. And I think Laura made the point of, science can seem really rigid. And ultimately it's not. It opens so many avenues, and it's just being open to what potentially could come. And then, using the understanding you have in those roles.
I think from my perspective, I'm a bit of a worrier. So as much as I sound like I pivoted and I changed, I worried through every one of those decision processes, don't get me wrong. So for me, it would be to enjoy the journey. Really just enjoy it. As Mollie says, you don't know where you're going to end up, but no decision is wrong. And to remember that and to really enjoy the journey, where you're going. And in the moment, we're a generation that thinks 10 steps ahead and what we're doing next week, next month. Enjoy the moment. And I think that's for me a big one, because I think I probably worried a little bit too much at times. Sit back and smell the roses or drink the coffee or whatever you need to do, and just be a little bit more present.
I think that's something I have to keep telling myself all the time.
Yeah. I think we all do now though as well, because we're all either thinking about what we have to do or what we just did. We're never just embracing.
Or where we should be in 5 years' time. And
exactly.
How we're going to get there.
Yeah, totally. And I think for me, again, back to, I think that's why vision boarding works for me, because there's no time limit. It's just something I want to do. And I know I will make my decisions aligned to that. So enjoy the journey.
I think that's good advice to your younger self as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Or what kind of career legacy do you hope to leave behind, and how would you like to be remembered?
As a good leader, I think. That would be how I would like to be remembered, and also that I've made an impact on people's lives as well, because it's how you make people feel is always going to be important, and that's the ultimate, I think, the kindest thing you can do as well.
That was a wonderful chat. I really enjoyed it. You're both hugely passionate about your careers and the opportunities you've been given in Kerry Group. And it sounds like a really good company around the initiatives around women in leadership and STEM, and so many pivots and turns you can make. But it's really come across. So thank you both for your time.
And thank you so much for having us. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. And your team here are fantastic. It's such a lovely organisation.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. A huge thank you to our guests from Kerry Group, Laura Collins and Mollie Mulligan, for sharing their stories of squiggly career paths, translating science into real-world impact, and the power of resilience, adaptability and inclusive leadership. Thank you again to our sponsors Finero. Tune in next week as we sit down with Nora O'Brien and Brenda Egan from Neurant Medical to explore the new stories of growth, passion and leadership. Until next time, keep striving for greatness. Together we can make stories like these heard. Subscribe, share this episode and keep reminding the world that in STEM and beyond, greatness has no gender.